My life as an Omega was simple and far from luxurious, but everything began to change on that day. The day when the arrival of a certain group of people turned everything upside down. They came at dawn. I was just sweeping the porch when I saw the riders, their armor glinting under the pale morning sun. My heart sank. Deep down, I knew they were coming for me. I never thought I'd leave Silverbrook. It was a small village tucked away in the mountains, a place where the wind carried the scent of pine, and the mornings were so quiet you could hear the rustling leaves like whispers of an old lullaby. Life was simple here, mundane even, and I liked it that way. But fate, it seems, had other plans. I stood frozen, gripping the worn-out broomstick in my hands as the riders approached. There were 5 of them, clad in royal silver and navy blue, their horses stamping impatiently against the dirt road that led to our tiny cluster of cottages. Villagers peered from their windows, watching with wary eyes. I felt their pity before I even understood why it was directed at me. "Are you Ash of Silverbrook?" The lead rider dismounted, his voice steady and authoritative. I swallowed hard, my fingers clenched around the broom. Yes, I am." Behind him, the others exchanged glances. They already knew, and so did I. "The Moon Council has summoned you," he said, his gaze unwavering. "You are to come with us to the capital." I could barely hear the words over the pounding in my chest. The capital? Why? I wasn't anyone important. I wasn't even the strongest Omega in the village. I was just me. I glanced back at the small cottage that had been my home for as long as I could remember. The door creaked open, and my father stepped out, his face pale, eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and something else. Relief? Had he known this day would come? "Omega," the rider repeated, softer this time. "You have been chosen to bond with the Crown Prince." My world tilted. Bond Prince. No. I took a step back, shaking my head. "There's been a mistake." "There is no mistake." His expression hardened. "The moon has chosen. Your name was written in the celestial records long before you were born." A sharp laugh escaped me, bitter and broken. "The moon? The moon doesn't know me." He ignored my words and gestured to the others. Before I could even think of running, 2 of them dismounted and flanked me on either side. My father didn't move. He didn't fight for me. No one did. I wasn't sure which hurt more, the inevitability of it all or the way no one seemed surprised. The journey to the capital felt like an eternity. We traveled through dense forests and open plains, the days blending into one another under the watchful eye of the moon. I didn't speak much. Neither did they. My thoughts were a tangled mess, bouncing between fear and defiance. What did they expect from me? To be docile, obedient? To bow my head and accept a fate I never asked for? I couldn't imagine myself as part of their world. A world of polished halls, grand feasts, and alphas who saw Omegas as little more than assets to be controlled. The thought of being bonded to someone like Prince Lion, the cold, distant figure I'd heard about in passing, made my stomach churn. One of the guards, a beta with kind eyes, must have noticed my tension. "It won't be so bad," he said one night by the campfire. "Prince Lion, he's not as cruel as they say." I scoffed, poking at the fire with a stick. "That's a low bar to clear." The beta smiled but said nothing more. When we finally arrived at the capital, it was like stepping into another world. The towering walls, the gilded gates, the endless rows of people watching from the streets. I felt their eyes on me. Some curious, some pitying, and others outright hostile. Inside the palace, everything gleamed in gold and silver. Chandeliers hung like captured stars, and tapestries told stories of ancient werewolves who ruled long before I was born. It was overwhelming, suffocating. I was taken to the grand hall where he waited, Prince Lion. He stood at the far end of the room, dressed in deep navy robes that clung to his broad frame. His dark hair was slicked back, revealing sharp, aristocratic features and cold, calculating gray eyes that pinned me in place the moment I stepped forward. He didn't speak, didn't even blink. He just looked at me, judging. I forced myself to hold my ground, swallowing back the fear crawling up my throat. "Your Highness," I said, My voice steady but my heart anything but. He tilted his head slightly, his gaze sweeping over me like I was something he hadn't quite figured out yet. Then, in a voice colder than the mountain winds, he said, "This is the Omega the moon has chosen for me?" His words weren't directed at me but at the king, who sat upon the throne with an unreadable expression. I bristled. I didn't choose this either. I shot back before I could stop myself. A tense silence fell over the hall. I could feel the guards stiffen behind me. But Lion, he simply narrowed his eyes, a flicker of something. Amusement? Irritation? Crossing his face. Defiant? He murmured, almost to himself. This should be interesting. I didn't like the way he said it. Like I was some puzzle to be solved, some challenge to be conquered. The king's voice broke the tension. You will be bonded in 3 days. 3 days. Just like that, my fate was sealed. That night, as I lay in the lavish bed they'd provided for me, staring at the moon through the towering palace window, I couldn't help but wonder, did the moon really choose this life for me? Or was I just another piece in a game I didn't understand? One thing was certain. I wasn't going to make it easy for them. The palace walls were suffocating. Everything here gleamed with a harsh, unnatural perfection. Gold-trimmed corridors stretched endlessly. Polished marble floors were so pristine, I was afraid to step too hard. Towering windows cast long, eerie shadows when the moon rose. Back home in Silverbrook, the moon felt like a friend. Here it was a distant, watchful eye, judging my every move. I walked through the halls with my head down, my hands curled into fists at my sides. Every glance, every whisper reminded me that I didn't belong. I was an outsider. An Omega plucked from a life of simplicity and thrown into a world of power games and whispered betrayals. The servants watched me with thinly veiled disdain. The nobles barely acknowledged my presence. And Lion? He hadn't spoken to me since our first meeting in the Grand Hall. That was 3 days ago. 3 days of suffocating silence. I was shown to my quarters by a stoic beta guard who barely spared me a glance. My room was larger than my entire house back home. Everything inside it, from the silk sheets to the velvet drapes, felt like it belonged to someone else. And maybe it did. Maybe I was just borrowing this life until they decided I wasn't worthy. Elin visited me that evening, carrying a tray of food I had no appetite for. "You haven't eaten," he said, setting it down on the ornate table beside my bed. "I'm not hungry." My voice came out quieter than I intended. Elin sighed, settling onto a nearby chair. He was the only familiar face in this place, and yet even he seemed different, more guarded, more cautious. "You need to eat, Ash. You'll need your strength if you're going to survive here." "Survive?" I echoed bitterly, picking at a piece of bread. "Funny. I thought I was supposed to thrive here." He gave me a small, sad smile. "This palace isn't kind to outsiders. I already knew that." The whispers followed me wherever I went. A commoner Omega? What was the council thinking? He's weak. He won't last a week. Prince Lion deserves better. I swallowed down the lump in my throat. Do they really hate me that much? Elin hesitated before answering. They're wary. No one expected the moon to choose someone from outside the noble bloodlines. They see you as a threat to tradition. A threat? I laughed humorlessly. I'm not even a threat to myself. He didn't argue. The next morning, I was summoned to the training grounds. I'd been told that Omegas were given education in court manners, diplomacy, and healing arts. But the moment I stepped onto the packed dirt field, I realized this was something else entirely. Alphas and betas sparred with swords and hand-to-hand combat, their muscles rippling under the early morning sun. Sweat and determination hung thick in the air. I swallowed hard, feeling entirely out of place among them. A tall, sharp-eyed woman in dark armor approached me. Omega, she said curtly, you're to begin physical conditioning today. I blinked. Physical? Conditioning? She arched a brow, clearly unimpressed. Did you think you'd sit in the palace and do nothing? Prince Lion's mate will not be weak. I wanted to protest, to tell her I had never trained a day in my life, but the weight of everyone's stares burned into me. So instead, I gritted my teeth and nodded. Fine. What followed was hours of relentless training that left me gasping for breath and trembling with exhaustion. Running laps around the training ground, dodging swinging wooden swords that bruised my arms, and lifting weights that felt impossible. By midday, my body felt like it was falling apart. Every muscle ached, my lungs burned, and my legs felt like they'd give out any second. But I refused to stop. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. When I collapsed in the shade of a nearby tree, gulping down water like a starving man, I felt a shadow fall over me. Looking up, I found myself staring into a pair of familiar, steely gray eyes. Lion. My chest tightened involuntarily. He stood with his usual air of cold detachment, arms crossed over his chest, watching me like I was some puzzle he couldn't quite figure out. "You're pushing yourself too hard," he said after a moment, his tone impassive. I wiped the sweat from my forehead, biting back a sarcastic remark. "I thought that's what you wanted. A mate who isn't weak." Something flickered in his expression, something I couldn't place. But it was gone before I could dwell on it. "I never said that. Didn't have to," I muttered, but I don't think he heard me. He studied me for a long moment before speaking again. "Meet me at the Moon Garden tonight. There are things we need to discuss." Then, without waiting for a reply, he turned and walked away, leaving me confused and oddly hopeful. Later that night, the Moon Garden was unlike anything I had ever seen before. Glowing white flowers blanketed the courtyard, their petals shimmering in the moonlight like scattered stars. A small fountain trickled in the center, its soft sound filling the air with an eerie sort of calm. I found Lion standing near the fountain, his back turned to me, gazing up at the full moon with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You came," he said without looking at me. "I figured ignoring an order from the prince wouldn't end well for me," I replied, folding my arms across my chest. He turned to face me then, his eyes scanning me like he was searching for something beneath the surface. "You're different than I expected." "I'll take that as a compliment," I said dryly. He smirked, just barely. "You should." A silence settled between us, heavy but not entirely uncomfortable. Then, after a long moment, he spoke again. "I don't want this either." I blinked. "What?" "This bond," he said quietly. "It was forced on both of us. I had plans, dreams, and now, suddenly, I have a mate I don't even know." Something inside me cracked. "You think I asked for this? You think I wanted to leave my home, my life, to be paraded around like some prize?" His jaw tightened. "Then why are you here?" I took a deep breath, looking away. "Because the moon chose me, and I can't fight fate." Lion was silent for a moment. Then he said, almost softly, "Neither can I." It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing to one I'd get from him. As I stood there, under the watchful glow of the moon, I realized something. Maybe we were both trapped in this. But that didn't mean I had to lose myself. And neither did he. Nights in the palace were unsettling. Despite the grandeur, the towering walls and endless corridors cast long shadows that whispered secrets only they knew. The moonlight filtered through the tall windows in fragmented pieces, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something, was always watching. I lay in my oversized bed, staring at the ceiling, the soft silk sheets feeling too foreign against my skin. My encounter with Lion earlier in the Moon Garden replayed in my mind like an unsolvable puzzle. "Neither can I." His words echoed in my head, a reluctant confession that made him seem less like the untouchable alpha prince and more human. But no matter how much I wanted to think about him, there was a growing unease crawling up my spine, an instinct I couldn't ignore. Something was wrong in this palace. The first time I heard them was when I wandered the halls late at night. I couldn't sleep, my thoughts tangled too tightly in the weight of my fate, so I ventured out into the quiet corridors, letting my feet guide me. Then I heard it. Low, urgent whispers drifting from around a corner. I pressed myself against the wall, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. The bond must be broken. Before it's too late. I sucked in a sharp breath. They were talking about me. Another voice, deeper and filled with authority, responded, "Not yet. The prince is too watchful." But soon, I dared to peek around the corner. Two figures cloaked in the darkness of the hallway stood close, their silhouettes barely visible under the dim lantern light. I couldn't make out their faces, but the way they spoke, it wasn't just idle gossip. It was a threat. My pulse quickened as I crept away, trying to keep my footsteps silent. I needed to tell someone. But who? Lion? Would he even believe me? I rushed back to my chambers, locking the door behind me. My fingers trembled as I pressed against the wooden frame, trying to catch my breath. Was I in danger? No, I was in danger. The next morning at breakfast, I sat beside Elin, pushing my food around my plate, my appetite gone. The grand dining hall was filled with nobles, their conversations an endless hum of politics and idle gossip. But I wasn't listening. I was too busy stealing glances toward the head of the table, where Lion sat, his sharp features unreadable as he exchanged words with his advisors. I needed to tell him, but before I could even think of approaching, a servant passed by and slipped something into my lap, a folded piece of parchment, sealed with an unfamiliar crest. I stared at it, heart pounding, before slowly unfolding it beneath the table. Stay away from the prince. The moon does not shine on your path. Cold dread pooled in my stomach. I looked around, but the servant who handed it to me was already gone, disappearing into the sea of faces. Elin noticed my change in expression. "What's wrong?" I swallowed hard, slipping the note into my pocket. "Nothing. I'm just not hungry." I found Lion later that day in the training grounds watching over the soldiers. He noticed me immediately but didn't look surprised, as if he expected me to come to him. "What is it?" he asked, his tone laced with impatience. I hesitated, gripping the note tightly in my hand. I need to talk to you. Alone." He studied me for a moment before nodding. Without a word, he led me to an empty corridor where the sound of swords clashing faded into the distance. I handed him the note, my fingers trembling. "I found this during breakfast." Lion took it, his brows furrowing as he read. His jaw tightened. "Who gave this to you?" "I don't know. A servant, I think. But it's not just that." I lowered my voice. "I overheard people talking last night. They want to break our bond, and I don't think they're going to wait much longer." For a moment, I expected him to brush me off, to tell me I was overreacting. But instead, his expression darkened, his eyes scanning the hallway as if searching for unseen threats. "You shouldn't wander the palace alone," he said finally, his voice quieter than before. "There are people here who don't want you around." I crossed my arms. I noticed. Lion exhaled, his hand raking through his dark hair. "I'll handle it." "That's not good enough," I snapped, surprising even myself. "I deserve to know if I'm in danger. I deserve to." "You deserve to be safe," he interrupted, stepping closer, his scent, a mix of cedarwood and something undeniably alpha, washing over me. "And I'll make sure of it." For the first time since I arrived, I saw something other than cold indifference in his eyes. Concern. Maybe even something deeper. I didn't know if I trusted him, but right now he was the only one who could protect me. That night, I locked my door and tried to sleep, but the unease in my gut refused to let me rest. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the window sent shivers down my spine. Then it happened. A soft click. The unmistakable sound of a lock being picked. I shot up in bed, my breath caught in my throat as the door slowly creaked open. A figure slipped inside, cloaked in darkness, their face hidden beneath a hood. I didn't think. I acted, grabbing the nearest object, an ornate lamp. I hurled it with all my strength. It shattered against the intruder's shoulder, and they stumbled, hissing in pain. I bolted for the door, but they were faster, stronger. A hand grabbed my arm, yanking me back, and for a terrifying moment, I thought this was the end. Then the door burst open. Lion. His eyes burned with fury as he crossed the room in an instant, grabbing the intruder by the collar and slamming them against the wall. A sharp grunt echoed through the chamber. "Who sent you?" Lion's voice was a low, dangerous growl. The intruder said nothing, but I saw the flicker of fear in their eyes before Lion's fist connected with their jaw, knocking them out cold. I stood there, trembling, heart pounding in my ears as the weight of what just happened crashed over me. Lion turned to me, his expression unreadable. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, barely able to find my voice. "No, I am okay," he sighed, running a hand down his face. "This isn't going to stop, Ash." His voice was grim. "They won't stop until they get what they want." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Then what do we do?" Lion met my gaze, and for the first time, I saw it, the fierce protectiveness beneath his cold exterior. "We fight," he said simply, and in that moment, I knew one thing. I wasn't running anymore. Being an Omega in a place like this was a dangerous thing. The attack last night had proven it. I wasn't just an inconvenience to the palace, I was a target. Someone wanted me gone, and I didn't think they cared how it happened. After Lion subdued the intruder, the palace guards swept in, carrying the unconscious figure away without a word. The silence left in their wake was deafening. I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands still trembling slightly from the encounter. My status as an Omega should have meant protection, a bond that tied me to Lion and kept me safe within these walls. But instead, it painted a target on my back. And Lion? He wasn't just any alpha. He was the crown prince, powerful, controlled, and infuriatingly distant. But now, with my life hanging by a thread, I needed him more than I cared to admit. The morning after the attack, I found myself being summoned, no, dragged, to the royal council chamber by 2 palace guards. The room was grand and imposing, with high ceilings and banners bearing the crest of the royal house. At the head of the long table sat King Alden, his sharp golden eyes watching me with the cool scrutiny of someone inspecting an object rather than a person. Lion stood to his right, his arms crossed, expression unreadable as always. "You were attacked in your own chambers," the king said, his voice calm but laced with an undercurrent of displeasure. "Do you have any idea why?" I swallowed, feeling my throat tighten. "No, your majesty," Lion spoke before the king could. "Someone within these walls wants the bond broken." His gaze flickered to me, then back to his father. "We need to find out who." I shifted uncomfortably. The word bond made my stomach twist. As an Omega, my fate was tied to his, but it felt more like a prison than a partnership. The king tapped his fingers against the table thoughtfully. "The bond between an Omega and an Alpha Prince is sacred, written in the stars long before either of you were born." His eyes pierced through me. "Do you not believe in fate, Ash?" I stiffened. "I believe in choices, your majesty." A long silence followed. I could feel Lion's gaze burning into me, but I didn't dare meet it. The king's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Choices mean little when the moon has already decided. After the council meeting, Lion wasted no time in pulling me aside. "We're going to start training," he said curtly, leading me down the hallways. "Training?" I blinked. "For what?" "For survival," I sighed, dragging a hand through my hair. "Lion, I'm an Omega. We're not exactly known for our combat skills." He stopped, turning to face me, his gray eyes locking onto mine with that same intensity that always left me breathless. "That's exactly why you need it." I hated that he made sense. The next few days were spent in the palace's private training grounds. Lion wasn't easy on me, and he certainly didn't hold back because I was an Omega. He pushed me harder than I thought I could handle, running drills until my legs felt like they'd collapse, teaching me how to hold a knife properly, and drilling into my head the importance of awareness. At first, I resented him for it. But slowly, I realized something. He cared. Not in the way I wanted, certainly not in the way an alpha was supposed to care for their destined mate, but in his own strange, distant way. Again, he barked, tossing me a wooden training blade. I groaned. "Are you sure you're not just doing this for your own amusement?" Lion's lips twitched, a rare sign of amusement. "Maybe." One night, after an exhausting day of training, I found myself wandering to the moon garden again. The pale glow of the flowers comforted me in a way nothing else in this place did. I didn't expect Lion to be there. He was leaning against one of the pillars, his gaze fixed on the moon above. The light made him look softer, less like the cold prince and more like someone real. "You should be resting," he said without looking at me. "So should you?" I shot back, stepping closer. He glanced at me, and for a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Something raw. "I don't sleep well," he admitted quietly. I hesitated. "Nightmares?" A short nod. "Memories." It wasn't much, but it was the most personal thing he'd ever shared with me. And suddenly, I didn't feel so alone anymore. "I don't sleep well either," I admitted. For once, we weren't arguing. We weren't talking about duty or bonds or politics. We were just us. Two people caught in something neither of us fully understood. Lion turned to face me fully, his gaze searching mine. "Ash," I held my breath, waiting. But whatever he was going to say, he didn't. Instead, he reached out, his fingers brushing against my wrist. The touch was fleeting, but it sent a shiver down my spine. "I won't let them hurt you," he said softly, almost like a vow. My heart pounded against my ribs, and I hated how much I wanted to believe him. Despite the moment we shared, the threats against me didn't stop. A few days later, another note appeared under my door. "You don't belong here. Leave before it's too late." I brought it to Lion immediately. He read it, his expression darkening. "They're getting bolder." I crossed my arms, trying to ignore the way my hands trembled. "And I'm getting tired of being scared." He met my gaze, something fierce in his eyes. "Then stop being scared. Start fighting." I didn't realize it at the time, but that was the moment something shifted inside me. I wasn't just a helpless Omega anymore. I was Ash, and I was gonna fight for my place here, whether they liked it or not. The palace felt different now. The air was heavier, the shadows darker, and the whispers louder. Every step I took carried the weight of something unseen, something inevitable. I was no longer just the Omega chosen by the moon. I was becoming a threat to those who wanted to keep the kingdom in their grasp. Lion's presence had become more frequent. He shadowed me, appearing in hallways I thought were empty, standing just close enough that his scent, that intoxicating blend of cedar and frost, reminded me he was there watching, protecting. But I couldn't tell if it was duty that kept him close, or something more. "You're not ready," Lion said. His arms crossed over his chest as he watched me struggling with the wooden training blade. I wiped the sweat from my brow, panting. "I'll never be ready if you don't let me try." His gray eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought he might argue. Instead, he lunged. I barely managed to dodge, the air rushing past me as his blade struck where I had been standing just seconds before. "You're too slow," he said, circling me like a predator. "If that had been a real attack, you'd be dead." I grit my teeth, frustration boiling inside me. "Maybe I'm not an alpha, but I can fight. I will fight." Something flickered in his expression, approval maybe, but it was gone too quickly to be sure. We sparred until my muscles screamed in protest. And still, I refused to stop. Lion finally relented, sheathing his blade. "Good," he said, his voice softer than before. "But you'll need more than strength. You need to outthink your enemies." I met his gaze, my breathing ragged. "Then teach me," and he did. A week later, the king summoned us both. I stood beside Lion in the great hall, my head held high despite the weight of the council's collective stare. They saw me as nothing more than an Omega, but I had learned that my title didn't define me. King Alden's voice was as cold as ever. "The council has reviewed the recent attacks against you, Ash. We believe it would be wise for you to leave the palace until the situation has been handled." "Leave?" I opened my mouth to protest, but Lion spoke first. "That won't happen." His tone was final, brooking no argument. The king's eyes darkened. "Lion, you cannot always protect him." Lion's gaze never wavered. "Watch me." A tense silence settled over the chamber. The council shifted uncomfortably, whispering among themselves. I took a step forward. "With all due respect, Your Majesty, running away won't solve anything." If someone wants me gone, they'll find me no matter where I am. The king regarded me for a long moment. Then finally he nodded. Very well. But be cautious, Omega. You are playing a dangerous game. I clenched my fists. I'm not playing anymore. After the council meeting, I found myself walking alongside Lion in the palace gardens, the moonlight casting silver patterns across the stone paths. He was quiet, as always, but his presence was different tonight. Closer. You didn't have to stand up for me, I said finally, breaking the silence. Lion glanced at me. I did. I stopped walking, facing him fully. Why? His gaze searched mine, and for once, I saw something raw beneath the ice. Because I know what it's like to be trapped in a role you never wanted. My chest tightened. Lion. He took a step closer, his scent wrapping around me like a protective shield. I won't let them take you from me, Ash. His voice was low, almost a whisper. I should have been afraid, but all I felt was warmth. Late that night, I found my way to the palace library, seeking answers. If I was going to survive here, I needed to understand why I was chosen in the first place. The dusty old tomes spoke of a prophecy, a forgotten legend about an Omega born under the rare celestial eclipse, destined to bring balance to the kingdom. I traced the words with trembling fingers. Couldn't be me, could it? Suddenly, the door creaked open, and I spun around, heart pounding. It was Lion. His eyes flickered to the book in my hands, then back to me. You shouldn't be here. I need to know, I whispered. What if I was chosen for more than just being your mate? His jaw clenched. Then you're in even more danger than we thought. The attack came faster than I expected. We were walking back from the gardens when it happened. One moment, everything was quiet. The next, the shadows came alive. Masked figures emerged from the darkness, their eyes filled with malice. Lion pushed me behind him, his body coiled like a predator ready to strike. Stay behind me, he growled, drawing his sword. But I didn't. I remembered everything he'd taught me. How to move, how to fight, how to think. I dodged the first strike, landing a kick to my attacker's ribs before they could react. Lion dispatched the others with terrifying efficiency, his movements fluid and deadly. But it wasn't enough. More were coming. And then I felt it. A strange warmth coiled in my chest, something ancient and powerful stirring deep inside me. My body moved on instinct, and for a brief moment, the moonlight around us seemed to grow brighter. I didn't understand it, but it was enough. By the time the last attacker fell, Lion was staring at me, his expression unreadable. What was that? I shook my head, breathing heavily. I don't know, but I could feel it now more than ever. Something inside me was awakening. Back in my chambers, Lion stood at the doorway, watching me as if afraid I'd disappear if he looked away. I met his gaze, my voice steady despite everything that had happened. I'm not going anywhere, Lion. His lips parted, and for a second, I thought he might say something. Instead, he stepped inside and pressed his forehead to mine, a silent promise passing between us. And I knew, without a doubt, that we were in this together. Tonight, I stood beside the Alpha Prince of Lemuria, my destined mate, facing the greatest threat this kingdom had ever known. And for the first time since I arrived here, I wasn't afraid. The air in the throne room was thick with tension. The council sat in their grand chairs, their eyes darting between me and Lion, some with suspicion, others with barely concealed contempt. King Alden's voice cut through the silence. The attacks have escalated. The Shadow Wolves will not stop until they have taken the throne. And the Omega, I stiffened at the way he said it. The Omega, like I was nothing more than an object to be possessed, a bargaining chip in their political game. But Lion's voice was firm. Ash is not just an Omega. He is my mate. He is under my protection, and I will not allow anyone to take him from me. I met his gaze, and for the first time, I saw something beyond duty in his eyes. There was possession, yes, but there was also something softer, something I didn't dare name yet. Then we fight, I said, surprising even myself. We don't run. We don't hide. We face them. Lion nodded once, a hint of pride flickering across his expression. Agreed. The palace was no longer safe, not with spies lurking in every corridor and the looming threat of the shadow. So we devised a plan, one that would force them out of hiding. Lion and I would attend the upcoming Moon Festival, a grand event where the entire kingdom gathered to celebrate the bond between alphas and omegas under the full moon's light. It was the perfect opportunity for our enemies to strike. "We're using me as bait," I muttered as we prepared. Lion glanced at me, his jaw tight. "You're more than bait, Ash." His voice was softer. "You're my mate." My chest tightened. The words should have scared me, but they didn't. Not anymore. The festival was dazzling. Golden lanterns floated in the night sky. Laughter and music filled the air, and the scent of roasted meats and sweet wines surrounded us. But beneath the beauty, I could feel it. Danger. Lion's hand rested on my lower back, guiding me through the crowds. To anyone watching, it was the possessive touch of an alpha protecting his omega. But to me, it was an anchor, grounding me in the chaos. "I won't let anything happen to you," he murmured in my ear. I shivered, not from fear, but from something deeper. "I trust you." His grip tightened. "Stay close." It happened too fast. One moment, we were standing by the ceremonial fire, and the next, the crowd parted like the sea as a group of masked figures emerged. The shadow wolves. Chaos erupted around us. Guards moved to intercept them, but I could see the truth in their dark eyes. They weren't here for the king or even Lion. They were here for me. Lion growled low in his throat, stepping protectively in front of me. "Don't you dare touch him." His voice was pure, lethal dominance. But I wasn't going to stand by and let him fight alone. I reached inside myself, tapping into the power that had been stirring in my chest since the first night I arrived at the palace. It was as if the moon itself was whispering to me, filling me with strength I never knew I had. The next attacker lunged, but this time I moved first. I sidestepped and slammed my elbow into his ribs, sending him sprawling. Another reached for me, but I ducked under his grasp, spinning away. Lion was at my side.